Hello and welcome to round 11 here at GP Prague. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by Matej, Big Z, Zalkai, and we have our first feature match ready for you. It's the players who are as so far undefeated. Niels Molle against Gianluca Gazzola. You'll have seen some of them in the feature match area last round because undefeated overnight. They're still undefeated now. The last two, Omnitel against Rug Delver or Tima Delver, depending on how you prefer to name it. But one way or another, we have a kind of a combo deck with a little bit of a control element and versus kind of a beatdown deck with a control element. Both these players trying to find a way of navigating through the counter spells to get their game going. And if we're looking for a big game, there are a few bigger than the one that Omnitel is able to present.
Oh yeah, and whereas last game we saw Gianluca Gazzola really can put his stifles to good use to counter Storm. On the other side, they're not that great against the show and tell or sneak attack. So I wonder how it's going to change the perspective on this matchup, because I think it's going to be a little tougher for Gianluca to win this one. On the other side of the board, Niels Molle actually recognized his name because he's actually residing in Ireland. So a lot of his countrymen are very active and supporting him during this tournament. They must be really happy back at home, being at 10-0, alongside the other Irishmen that are present here. So.
Well, Gianluca Gazzola has a comparatively small Tarmogoyf in play at present. His Wasteland has no targets just yet, just a basic land in play for Niels Molle, who resolved a ponder on turn 1, is now having a little think about how best to play out his turn 2.
Yeah, he sees that Wasteland, so he also has to think about his land drops for his turn, because as we've seen, timely Wastelands and Stifles on your fetchlands can really put a hurt on the mana.
Well, there's a Force of Will, which I'm guessing is targeting this Tarmogoyf. A daze in order to force it through. And Gazzola just getting ready with the Tarmogoyf die there, wanting to make sure that he can signal to all of us exactly how big it is. Currently a 2-3, but plenty of room for improvement there.
And no open blue mana for Gianluca for stifling that fetch land, compared to the last match we've seen, as the Tarmogoyf grows through 3-4. Yeah, Niels has to be very careful here because he lost a lot of cards trying to counter that Tarmogoyf, and Gianluca also has more dazes in his hand, which are actually really good in this matchup, especially if you put up early pressure in the form of Delver of Secrets or the Tarmogoyf.
And often when you see Daze, Stifle does come along with it, because the two of them work very well together. If you're stifling fetch lands, it means that your opponent is a little bit more pinched on mana, which means that those dazes can be all the more effective. So Grizzlebrand, the draw there for Niels Molle. Not one that he's planning on casting, but he's got a number of ways of getting it into play between show and tell and sneak attack.
Yeah, but he already has an Emrakul, which is, I would say, much better.
Volcanic Island and a pass here, just sort of leaving it out there for the Wasteland. Bait.
Yeah, well, Gianluca might not be inclined to use that Wasteland very quickly. He doesn't have another land. He does have double days, which is pretty good if you're beating down.
He has days for days.
Indeed.
So there's the Wasteland on Volcanic Island. Gazzola there with a threat on the board, deciding that it's worthwhile to just try and keep things a little bit clearer on the other side of things. Niels Molle simply drawing and passing. Pretty calm over there.
Yeah, he's not in a rush yet. The Tarmogoyf is a 4-turn clock for now. I'm sure Gianluca would have been much happy if it was a 4-5 rather than a 3-4.
More copies of Days being drawn by Gazzola here.
That's a show and tell. See, I see some spell pierces. I see a sneak attack as well, but Niels really needs the extra mana. I think something like a City of Traders would be really good in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, if he reached the point where he was able to cast sneak attack and use it on the same turn, just so that he was able to sort of really get the full surprise value. But at the moment, Tarmogoyf putting enough pressure on his life total that sooner or later he may just have to pull the trigger on that one. Spell snare the draw. Spell pierce the draw for Gazzola. So now effectively he has 2 counter spells available.
And he happily discards the Dismember. Another spell. I think Gianluca has 3 dazes in his hand, and Niels has 3 spell pierces in his hand, but no player has the required mana he needs. But Gianluca does draw the Wasteland here. I think that's going to be it for this game once that Volcanic Island is gone.
Yeah, able to force the issue a little bit. Niels Molle, facing down lethal, has to go for it in whatever fashion he's able. Cast a Ponder. It's going to need to be quite good here.
Yeah, he would have needed the City of Traders there, and I still think it wouldn't have been enough. So I don't think he has any answers to the Tarmogoyf in the main deck. No. So he's just basically hoping, but not really anything he can hit. Yeah.
All right, so it's on to game 2 here in our Battle of the Undefeateds at the top table. We're going to get a chance to have a little bit of a look in on one of our other matches soon enough, though, as those players go to their sideboards. Plenty more magic there on that main table, and we're going to get a chance to jump across and see what's going on our table 2.
Yeah, table 2 is actually a match I requested to be in the feature match area because I saw last round Per Henriksson on Reanimator defeated Lucas Blåhorn on around table 8 or 9. So I really wanted to get a good glimpse of the Reanimator deck because we haven't seen much of it this weekend.
Well, there's Thought Not Seer being resolved here, and you'll notice that there's more than 7 cards in Per Henriksson's hand. The reason for that is there's 1 creature in play for him. The reason he's on 12 life is, I'm guessing, because he's paid 7 in order to be able to draw a whole bunch of extra cards and reanimate the choice in terms of what to remove there by the Thought Not Seer.
Yeah, but still so much left in the tank still. The only thing Per Henriksson is missing from this hand is another reanimation spell, but he has Careful Studies, Brainstorms, Entomb even.
He also has Grizzlebrand to help him draw those reanimation
Yeah, of course. But I mean, it's not like he needs it now. He has a 7/7 life flicker on the board against 2 Thought Knots here. So even I think with a Reality Smasher, Per can easily attack here to put marker down to 9 and put himself up to 19, and then he can swing again. With the only problematic would be like a second Reality Smasher, and he can still dig for more cards here.
Yeah, the fact that Per chose to attack first gives us a little bit more information about what type of reanimation deck he might be. If he was one of the ones that's looking to go off in a big way, almost storm things out, he may have chosen to wait on the attack because he might have been able to get an Emrakul into play.
Per Henriksson needs to discard down to hand size because he has way too many. Yeah, it's that he passed the turn, but
yeah, effectively, sort of the appropriate terminology there is, I want to move to my end step and discard, at which point your opponent has the opportunity to do something. The last thing that happens on your turn is the discarding.
Yeah.
And, well, there's some reanimation targets. Elesh Norn, Grave Titan, and another copy of Grizzlebrand.
It's one way to get those cards in the graveyard. Just discard to your hand size.
Yeah, it's not the worst problem to have, having 10 cards in hand.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Reanimator decks being notoriously explosive, meaning that they on turn 2 it's fairly likely that they'll be reanimate a big threat, but they suffer a lot from graveyard haste, such as Rest in Peace, and we've seen a lot of surgical extractions. So I wouldn't say I'm like that surprised to see Per Henriksson at the top table, but it certainly has caught my eye as the day went along.
I mean, if nothing else, part of the reason I wanted to see it in the feature match area is it's just cool.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
It's nice seeing. We see a lot of Force of Wills flying around, and when you ask people the reason that they're playing Force of Will, a lot of it is, I need to be able to stop the scary things that can happen on the first couple of turns. And this is an example of what those scary things might be.
Yeah.
Grizzlebrand crashing on through. Marco de Togni down to just 2 life here.
Yeah. And Per is just going to check what's going on, get some more information with that Thoughtseize. I think there's a Warping Will in Marco's hand that he could use to counter the Thoughtseize if he wanted to, but I'm sure he wanted to keep it up just in case another Reanimate or Exhume would have been played. Yeah. So he's going to counter the Thoughtseize. Will deny... actually, looks like he's putting an Eldrazi Scion, so he probably doesn't have anything relevant in his hand in that case, if he's putting an Eldrazi Scion into play. It looks like a foreign language Warping Will, so they're going to get the judge to actually say what the card does.
Quite a lot of things is the short answer on that one.
Yeah, so give me the rundown.
So the one that we're seeing here is you get to put a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion into play. That Scion, of course, you can sacrifice for colourless mana whenever you so choose. You can also use it to counter a sorcery spell. You can also use it to exile a smaller creature, so a creature with, I think it's a power of 2 or less.
It's power or toughness, 1 or less.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, which is actually interesting because we haven't had cards that care about power and toughness at the same time. And I think that this versatility is also why it's being played. We've seen Delver Secret, Deathrite Shaman. There's been a lot of low power or toughness creatures.
Yeah, sometimes you just need to get that Bell for Strix out the way
Exactly.
so your Reality Smasher can smash on through. There's lots of good things to remove. And if nothing else, it's a a colourless instant spell. There's not very many instant ways of interacting when all of your lands are not tapping for coloured mana. So
yeah, and it looks like Per is in great shape here with having drawn a Daze and a Force of Will. With being on 18 and with a Grizzled Brand in play when your opponent's doing the small warping whale for Eldrazi sign, you should be fine. But I think he's probably going to force here. He just wants to see Marco's hand. This approach is a little risky here, but yeah.
Well, just a couple of lands, nothing to take for the Thoughtseize, but a fairly reassuring moment for Per Henriksson here, knowing that he's running fairly safe.
Yeah, I think this game is about to finish as well, so we should move to our original main match here between Gianluca Gazzola and Niels Molle here.
Yeah, I think the writing probably on the wall here for Reanimator. So let's drop down again and see what's happening between our main match, the two undefeated players, Niels Molle on Omnitel, and we have Gianluca Gazzola on his Rug Delver.
And again, those spells flying. Look, Per Henriksson went for a turn 1 show and tell, but there is a Force of Will exiling, or was that the other way around?
Niels Molle went for an early show and tell. We're just updating the score key for you on that one.
Yeah, so he went for Force of Will exile days. It's just the position of the days. It's just really strange considering it should be exiled somewhere further off camera. So this looks like more it's on the stack.
Yeah, I think that basically because the graveyard ends up being so important for Gazzola's deck in terms of casting things like Hooting Mandrills, he likes to kind of have it front and center a little bit.
Yeah. I quite like Gianluca Gazzola's approach to the format. There wasn't a lot of Teamer Delver overall on the weekend, but he's really made it work. Disruptive, yet still aggressive. I like it.
I mean, there's been a few schools of thought over the years on exactly how best to build it. It's certainly not universal that everyone's running the Stifle and Daze combination to really potentially attack the mana of different decks. Interested to see how it pairs up against something like Eldrazi.
Yeah. But I mean, he does have Tarmogoyf, which is very helpful in that matchup. And Hooting Mandrills also can trade with some Thought-Knot Seers and whatnot. He has the Dismember. But yeah, it would seem like the Eldrazi might not be the best matchup, but it's definitely something that he can beat.
So the first show and tell down for Niels Molle. It's going to be a matter of whether or not he can reload fast enough to get things going here, because his is very much a deck that needs to resolve key spells. And unfortunately for him, he is paired against a deck that has an uncommon amount of counter magic.
Yeah. It's not only the common Force of Will and Daze that we see in Delver builds, such as the Grixis Delver or the Solitaire Delver, but he also has the 4 Stifles, and he can bring in the Flusterstorms as well. So it could be quite annoying, but Gianluca does have quite a few. I think he has 3 lands and a Brainstorm in his hand, so Gianluca's really hoping to fire off his own Brainstorm and shuffle away a couple of lands there, as Niels is resolving one of his own.
Niels also does have a show and tell in hand, so presumably when he cast the first one, he did have something big to put into play. I'm guessing that's not gone away.
Yeah.
And this is the thing with decks like Omnitel. Once they resolve one spell, be it a show and tell or potentially a sneak attack, you do potentially just win the game.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure the life total is a little off though. Gianluca should be on 19 because he did cast the Force of Will.
Yeah, and it looks like we've had a couple of fetch lands there too.
Yeah,
we'll
that's the second one, so he should be down to 18 here. Oh, actually 17 here, right after 2 fetch lands. Yeah, we'll check with our score keep down at the feature match area to get it fixed maybe.
Yeah, having to jump about between matches means that occasionally there's just a couple of points that get a bit
there
tricky.
We go.
It would be reasonable to say, though, that when the Omnitel deck wins, it tends to do such big chunks of damage that the 1 point here and there isn't always relevant. But we'll try and keep things as up to date for you as you can.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough spot for Niels here because Gianluca is already set up with his defenses in his hand. I see a Stifle. I think I saw a Flusterstorm as well. And now Gianluca digging for more. Another Stifle. As I said, they're not that great against the show and tell and sneak attack, but they're really good at blowing up those fetch lands. So, and it seems like it will be key in this matchup. Niels patiently here, not sacking the Mystic Rainforest just yet. He did keep a good card on top in the form of Brainstorm, so he wants to set up his turn still. He could try to go for it here, but he should start by sacrificing the fetch to see if that gets past the Stifle, because if he would go for a Show and Tell first, and then would get Dazed or Flusterstorm or something similar, and that would be quite problematic for him.
Yeah, with Omnitel, because it is about resolving the big spell, timing becomes very important.
Yeah.
In some cases, I mean, we saw him try for the turn 1 Show and Tell. Often that's a great time to do it because your opponent hasn't had a chance to set up. Once you get past that, though, in some respects, waiting until you have to go for it where you can build up more resources to protect it may be a stronger play.
Yeah, precisely. And Gianluca had a land on top, so once he fetched, he knew where to find it, and he'll be able to set up his mana. The one thing that Gianluca could really use here, all the counter magic in the world won't help you if you don't have any pressure to win the game, because at some point Niels can set up a lot of mana on his side of the board and make stuff like Spell Pierces, Dazes, and Flusterstorms a little less relevant.
Looks like he drew a Hooting Mandrills, though, and
Perfect.
that's kind of an ideal draw because plenty of cards in that graveyard, so he will be able to cast Hooting Mandrills for just the 1 mana if he so chooses.
Yeah. As if I was a prophet. Calling out for that Hooting Mandrills. It's a great card here. 4 power immediately.
Well, if anyone's going to be profiting here, it's going to be Gianluca Gazzola, already at 10-0 and putting down a 4/4 for 1 mana. Can't argue with that rate.
Yep. You would think it's not a great combo with your own Tarmogoyfs, but it rarely comes up. You still get to control what cards you would keep in your graveyard, and your opponents are helping out quite a bit as well. Yeah,
at the moment we've got sorcery, instant, artifact, and land, so Tarmogoyfs will still be plenty big enough, and a Stifle on a fetch land there means that Niels Molle, stuck on less mana, has to use a Brainstorm here just to try and smooth out his draws as best he can, but unless he's got a shuffle effect, that Brainstorm may effectively leave him, we call it Brainstorm locked. You put a couple of cards on top and are just sort of stuck there.
And that's some of the worst things that can happen. It does draw a Blood Moon that I don't think he will want, just because he does have no red mana for the time being.
Ancient Tomb is certainly interesting.
Actually, quite like the sideboarding of the Blood Moon, because there's no basic lands for Gianluca Gazzola. He only has 4 Wastelands, 3 Tropicals, and 3 Volcanic Islands. Lands that actually provide him mana outside of fetch lands, obviously. And I think Niels drew an Impulse.
Yes, I believe so. So 5 mana available for Niels Molle here. So at least Spell Pierce is not something he's going to have to worry about if he's going to try and resolve a Show and Tell.
Yes.
Or the first Spell Pierce, should I say.
Yes, so there's a Show and Tell. So 3 mana, each player can put a creature, artifact, or land into play.
I think enchantments are also allowed.
Enchantments,
because Omniscience is a fairly important one.
Of course, yes, enchantment. But no Planeswalkers.
Correct. Planeswalkers were not a thing at the point that this card was envisaged.
And we know that Niels has an Emrakul in his hand. Gianluca Gazzola does not. Let's see if we can do something about this. I think I see a Flusterstorm, but...
Yeah, that Ancient Tomb prior to Show and Tell, pretty important because it does cut down the amount of types of counter magic that are going to work here.
Right, so he Flusterstorms that, so it's for 1 blue counter target instant sorcery spell unless its control pays 1 and has Storm. So now Niels has to pay 2 mana to so that it doesn't get countered. And I assume Gianluca has 1 more. Yep.
Yeah, the second Flusterstorm. Now for 3, and that enough to stop Show and Tell number 2.
Yeah, Niels Molle not only has an Emrakul, but he also has the Omniscience in his hand. But I assume he has another Show and Tell that he's going to go for the following turn.
I mean, that turn he functionally hit himself with Hooting Mandrills off those 2 Ancient Tombs.
Yeah.
They tap for 2 mana, but they do you 2 damage. And another Ponder here from Gianluca Gazzola, just looking to keep things on the up and up. Sees a Daze alongside a couple of other cards I can't quite make out there.
I really want to know what they are too.
There's a Tarmogoyf.
Yeah.
Might be a couple of Dazes actually.
Yeah, but he can only draw one of them. So he actually goes for the Tarmogoyf. So he wants to put Niels in a precarious position. I think that's going to be a 3/4.
We have land, sorceries, artifacts, and instants. So 4, I believe. Though for that to be the case, it does, of course, need to resolve. Force of Will says no. And Omniscience having to get exiled. That was the big game that he was going for off Show and Tell, potentially.
Yeah. Interesting. So if he has Show and Tell and Emrakul in his hand, that's fine. Did he draw? I don't think he drew a card for his. Oh no, he has Impulse.
So I'm guessing that last turn the ideal play was for him to cast Show and Tell, put in Omniscience, use Omniscience to cast Emrakul for free, take an extra turn,
yes,
and then be able to attack immediately.
Indeed.
But Impulse here.
Actually quite problematic for Niels because once that Hooting Mandrills attacks, it's going to put him down to 4, so he won't be able to use his Ancient Tombs anymore.
Sees a Cunning Wish and a City of Traitors. I think that's a Cunning Wish there.
Yeah. It looked that way.
Cunning Wish, of course, part of the pieces of the puzzle of ways to win once you've got your Omniscience in play. You can Cunning Wish for a whole host of very powerful spells, one of which is entertainingly you can draw a lot of your deck with Fireman's Foresight and then start doing crazy things with your additional Cunning Wish, ultimately leading to Release the Ants.
Yeah. That's really when I saw like that card being played for the first time, I was like, this cannot be true. What is going on?
Someone went deep and they found something rather impressive. So a Vendilion Click in draw step here. So there are 3 cards currently in Niels Molle's hand. One of them, if Gianluca Gazzola so chooses, is going to go on the bottom and get replaced by a random card.
Yeah, and I think he said, you can keep this, and Niels was like, all right, I scoop. He wasn't 2, couldn't use his Ancient Tombs without dying, so that means that Gianluca Gazzola wins 2-0. Rather handily as well, just setting up a barrier of counter magic, playing a 1-mana 4/4, and taking that to victory.
So 11-0 now, Gianluca Gazzola. Congratulations to him. I'm sure we'll be seeing plenty more of him in the feature match area. We're going to get a chance to jump across and see even more Magic now because there are more matches carrying on here in the feature match area, and we've got some of them to show you. Penn Henriksson on Reanimator. He picked up the first game fairly handily by being able to reanimate Gristlebrand very, very quickly. This time round, it looks like those careful studies haven't found quite so much. Meanwhile, Marco de Togni has been able to get rid of one careful study with his Thought-Knot Seer, and with a Thorn of Amethyst in play, everything that Reanimate is doing gets kind of expensive.
Yeah, every non-creature spell costs 1 more, so it's not that easy to play Entomb into Exhume or Reanimate, so Per Henriksson will have to divide those among 2 turns, and there's quite a lot of pressure from Marco here.
Yeah.
Pumping up his Eldrazi may make up to a 4/4 and swinging in for 8. It's basically threatening lethal for the following turn.
Yeah, and Reanimator, not a deck that is known for running loads of removal. I mean, the perfect draw here, if he's running it, would be to be able to... Well, I mean, he's entombing here. If he's got a land to reanimate, I mean... The perfect one would be something along the lines of Blazing Archon so that there's no attacks coming from the Eldrazi. That is something that I've seen talked about a little bit. The Eldrazi isn't a deck that necessarily has loads of ways of getting past the equivalent of a moat. We'll see whether or not that's in this particular list.
But he does have... it's interesting now. He does have Tidespout Tyrant. He goes for a Grizzlebrand. He could have gone for an Elish Norn, which would definitely have stopped the bleeding quite a bit. That would make that would kill the Eldrazi Mimic and make the other 2 creatures just 2/2s. It looks like he's going to go for a Grizzlebrand, which is also fine because it's big enough that it can block something and gain you life back.
Yeah, I mean, at this point on 8 life, he's not really in a position to be able to afford to draw cards with it. I like the Tidestep Tyrant, though. You can do a lot of very cool things with that, especially if you've drawn into the likes of Lotus Petals and so on.
Yeah, but he doesn't have any reanimation spells, it looks like. He might bring in also a Show and Tells, which are good against Graveyard Hate, but not that great against something like Thorn of Amethyst. Just makes it that much more expensive. So he definitely has options. The card I'm most surprised about in the sideboard is Sire of Insanity.
So that's the one that means that at the end of each player's turn, they're discarding down to 0 cards in hand.
Yes, for Rakdos card. 6, 4, 4, 5 or 6, I think. Yeah.
6/4, yes.
I think I played against the Pro Tour.
Was that Pro Tour Dragon's Maze by any chance?
Yes, it was Pro Tour Dragon's Maze. Those were the times.
There was some good times in that Pro Tour.
But that was the last block constructed Pro Tour, I think.
It was block constructed, a format that kind of flip-flopped between being absolutely incredible in some formats and a little narrow in others.
Yeah.
My personal favourite format, I think, almost of all time, was Invasion block constructed,
Oh,
where
yeah.
there were just an absurd number of different decks. But, you know, bit
That
of
was fun.
variation
That
there.
was fun.
And it's one of the cool things about Legacy is the fact that we get to see some of the star players from pretty much every block that's ever existed. We saw a Pernicious Deed yesterday, which was a nice little callback to Invasion. And when you piece together some of these decks, they could only really exist in Legacy, as you see how some blocks from generations apart differ. So you've got your Eldrazi deck that's also running Chalice of the Void, which was printed a good 10 years earlier, which is being powered up by City of Traitors that was brought out a number of years before that. It's really a sort of a living museum of everything that's happened in Magic.
I love that about the format. And we'll see what the approach is going to be for these two players here. I think Pair is going to be in a really good spot being on the play this time around. And if he keeps a reasonable hand, I don't think there's much the Eldrazi deck from Marco de Togni can do. He does have 4 Leyline on the Void, though, as this first Carnage Cyber, as well as the Thorn of Amethyst. So he might try to mulligan aggressively to get to those Leyline of the Void, because they're just so important against the Reanimator deck.
And if he does have a turn 0 Leyline of the Void, how many ways are there on the other side of the table to get rid of that?
One. I see one Echoing Truth in the main deck from Per Henriksson. Nothing else.
I guess Tidespite Tyrant in principle, but you still need to get it in play for that to
Yeah.
happen. And I suppose Show and Tell also gives you a bit of an out against the Leyline of the Void plan.
Exactly.
So it'll be interesting to see whether or not Marco decides that he is going to aggressively go for that Leyline, because, of course, choosing to mulligan when otherwise you don't really have to is potentially a good way of losing the game.
Yeah, probably the best set of opening draws for Marco is if his opening hand includes Thorn of Amethyst, Leyline of the Void, and an Ancient Tomb, he's going to be in great shape.
Is there Ancient Tomb in Marco's deck as well?
Yes. Yeah, 4 Ancient Tombs. 4 City of Traders, as well as the traditional Eldrazi lands and Mishra's Factories and Wastelands. He's playing the regular colorless Eldrazi. He doesn't even have Urborg to help cast out his members. So he even has 2 Trinisphere in his main deck.
I do like a bit of Trinisphere. It's one of those cards that it got restricted in Vintage simply because it makes games miserable. But speaking of miserable games, Per Henriksson is going to have to play Reanimator without a graveyard. At least for now, as there is a turn 0 Leyline of the Void from Marco de Togni. That's going to make this game 3 a lot tougher for Henriksson.
Yeah. So even without needing to mulligan, Marco finds the Leyline of the Void. And so now fortunately for him, he does have a pair of Ponders. So meaning that he can start looking for those show and tells. He only has 2. I remember Loic Le Briand in Paris. He managed to get into the top 4 playing Reanimator, and I believe he had 4 show and tells, especially against these graveyard hate cards.
So I think every single time Per is going to have to remember about that Leyline of the Void. Doesn't matter what it is that's going to the graveyard, it is going to be getting exiled as a replacement effect.
Yep. Wants to shuffle. Nothing interesting in those top 3 cards. Where are my show and tells?
Yeah, I think that we're going to be seeing more Ponder shuffles here for Per Henriksson, because the difference between the good cards and the bad cards once Leyline of the Void in play is night and day.
Yeah, definitely. And if not Ponders, he also certainly wouldn't mind some Brainstorms. He does have at least Force of Will in his hand, so he might slow down the beatdown of Marco a little. But Marco has... I see Endless One, I think it's double Reality Smasher.
Well, Entomb, not the draw that he was looking for.
Yeah, but Marco drawing the Thorn of Amethyst, the perfect hand that I described has been basically put together. There's no Ancient Tomb, there's only a City of Traders, so he will probably hold off on playing the Thorn of Amethyst, but no, we'll see. I might be mistaken in the end.
Yeah, City of Traitors has... I mean, all of the older lands that tap for 2 in this deck have some sort of a drawback. Ancient Tomb dealing damage to you. City of Traitors, in some respect, a little bit of a harsher drawback, which is to say that while it's in play, as soon as you play another land, you have to sacrifice that City of Traitors. So you get to tap it for mana and then play a land and potentially ramp up to more mana, but playing a first turn City of Traitors in many cases is not ideal. So that presumably what Marco de Togni is thinking about here. Elects for Eldrazi Temple for an Eldrazi Mimic, so effectively still getting 2 mana on the first turn.
Oh, there's the show and tell though.
All right, we have a game.
Pair will probably ponder here or brainstorm. No, ponder. All right, so now what I think Pair will need to achieve is Force of Will the next play, whether it's Thought Knot Seer or Throne of Amethyst. One of the two at least.
Now, one card that potentially is a good card to put into play off a show and tell for the Eldrazi deck is Endbringer. It's a card that can quite happily shut down one big threat that is being put into play on the other side.
Yeah.
Obviously, if that one big threat is Griselbrand's still drawing you cards, but in terms of at least not getting beaten up by a big creature, Endbringer can do the needed.
Yeah, and especially with Leyline of the Void already in play, Endbringer can just make sure that Griselbrand never gets to attack, and you'll just set up your board, because then Pair would need another show and tell. And as you can see, Pair actually already has that Griselbrand in hand, so I firmly expect to see a Force of Will on whatever is going to be played in this turn by Marco. And if Pair has another land, he's going to go for the show and tell and putting Griselbrand into play. Marco did draw an Ancient Tomb here, so he still doesn't have to play the City of Traders. Because remember, City of Traders said you can add 2 colors mana to your mana pool when you tap it, but when you play another land enters the battlefield on your side of the board, you have to sacrifice it.
Well, there's Ancient Tomb, that nice draw. Just 2 points coming through from Marco de Togni here.
So it seems like Thorn of Amethyst is going to be the play. Or is it?
Just a small, endless one there. By small, we mean a 2/2 here.
Yeah, that's just bait Pair. Don't take the bait just yet. Here comes the big one. Thorn of Amethyst.
Marco just sort of points at it there, going, "How's this one for you?"
Yeah, and there's the Force of Will. He tried to bait it out with that endless one, with no dice. It's so obvious when you play a post. Whoa, he even exiles a show and tell. So does he have 2 in his hand?
It seems like a big card to let go.
Yeah.
Even if ultimately you were going to have to pay 4 for it rather than 3.
Yeah, he does have another one. Does he have the land? It looks like he does. So 2 fetch lands. All right. So Leyline of the Void. I don't care about that one. He didn't have any other blue cards in his hand. That's why he had to exile one of the show and tells. He has a useless Entomb. A card that I was so lucky to preview along with my other team members from Team Tournament Center during the EMA spoiler season. Eternal Masters out now.
Yeah, a very powerful card in Tomb, obviously, for the Reanimator deck under normal circumstances. Not quite as good when there's a Leyline of the Void in play.
Yeah.
I guess in principle you might want to thin your deck, but that a relatively marginal use for Entomb, which is obviously very powerful with the Reanimator strategy.
All right, so here's the show and tell. Mark is like, "Yep, I already know which one it's gonna be," and it's actually this might be a problem for Pair, because not only does Marco get to put in the Reality Smasher here, he also has another Reality Smasher in his hand. So if Pair ever decides to attack, Marco can swing back for a lot of damage.
Yeah, I mean, even just sort of right now, we know that there's a City of Traitors in his hand. If he wanted to, he could cast that Reality Smasher. His Eldrazi Mimic becomes a 5/5 also.
Yep.
He's swinging in for 17. Now, of course, Henriksson on 14 and with a life-linking blocker that can just eat one of those Eldrazi.
Yeah, so he's not going to do it here, but Marco de Togni is probably going to wait for the next turn once Pair decides to attack. Because I don't think Pair at this point, he already has 2 show and tells exiled. There's a Leyline of the Void. The only thing that could really improve his board would be to play Echoing Truth and Okay, yeah, this is even better for Marco. He just plays another creature, and next turn he'll be able to swing in for even more damage. And the only thing Per could be thinking about doing here is the Echoing Truth. Oh yes, he's just explaining what it does. So, Matter Reshaper, when it dies, you get to reveal the top card of your library. If it costs 3 or less, you can put it into play.
You may put it.
You may put it in play. Otherwise, you put it in your hand, which is also great.
Yeah, it's kind of almost always a win. I mean, the best that someone can do is exile it, at which point you've probably got a 1-for-1. So let's think. With what's on the board, assuming that a Reality Smasher came down next turn, that would be an attack for 5, 10, 15, 17, 20. Per Henriksson going up to 21 on this attack as he takes Marco de Togni down to 11. And on 21, there has to be a little bit of a temptation to draw cards, though. And that
For sure.
could prove painful.
He can draw 21 cards. It's a careful study. The best card that Per could draw here would be the Echoing Truth. Could potentially be able to bounce both Reality Smashers. Well, there's only one, but we know about another one in Marco's hand. So that's a lot of damage. If that resolves, that's a lot of damage. But we know Per drew Force of Will, but I'm not sure if he actually has another blue card in his hand. And this could be the key moment in this game.
Marco de Togni very carefully weighing up his options there. We saw him make a little bit of space on the board, which subtle tell that there might be another creature coming along. Takes a couple of damage from this Ancient Tomb. Can't get away from that. But another Reality Smasher asking a big question of Per Henriksson.
Yeah, Per just keeping his card close. Like what he could do here, he could draw 7 with the Grizzlebrand and counter it, because effectively countering that Reality Smasher prevents 9 damage, or probably a different number. So it's +3 from the Eldrazi Mimic because it's 2 on base. So preventing basically the Eldrazi Mimic from growing up to a 5/5, and the 5 from Reality Smasher, while being, so that's 8 total. But the Force of Will be an extra life here. So he doesn't have another blue card. It's an Exhume. So if he wants to counter the Smasher, he needs to draw 7 here. But he's pretty close to dying in that case, but I think he's still alive. He has then 12 damage on the board, so Per Henriksson will go down to 1 if he draws 7 here and plays a Force of Will.
He'll also go to 1 if he doesn't do that. So I think 1 less Reality Smasher on the board does make sense. Pays his life. We already see an Echoing Truth.
That's a fantastic draw too.
Yeah, a whole host of gas. I mean, anytime you draw 7 cards, you've got to feel pretty pleased with yourself.
Yeah, and actually, at this point, I would think about actually not countering the Reality Smasher, letting it resolve and just Echoing Truthing those 2 back. That would mean that Per would take 5, 7, 10 damage, but he can then Force of Will the following turn. And actually, it's even better because Marco can't tap the Ancient Tomb next turn after the Grizzlebrand attacks. So there's the Echoing Truth. Targets the Reality Smasher. Remember, it not only returns 1 creature, it returns both.
He will have to discard a card here because he's targeting that Reality Smasher.
He's reading the card. He wants to know if Per will be forced to discard 2 cards, but that's not how it works. But he'll probably ask a judge.
Yeah, always best to make sure. And I'm sure that Per Henriksson, I mean, that Reanimate in his hand, not looking a particularly exciting card left here.
Yeah. It's Per drew the right cards at the right time.
It's easy to draw the right cards at the right time when you draw an extra 7, but to be honest, the important bit was that show and tell.
Yeah.
Or the second show and tell, I suppose. Looks like he's just figuring out the discards there. They are getting a judge just to confirm.
Yeah. I think the way the rules work, he will only have to discard 1 card, but Marco seemed pretty insistent on saying it's 2 cards or calling a judge. So for those who don't know Echoing Truth, it says return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and all cards with the same name as the returned permanent. So, yeah, I think a judge is now confirming that it's only one card that's being discarded. Because the Reality Smasher, whenever a Reality Smasher becomes a target of a spell or ability, discard or just a spell, I think. Yeah, but the Eldrazi Mimic, it only copies the power toughness, doesn't become a copy of that creature. So that means Per Henriksson here takes 7 damage, goes down to 7. Marco will swing back for 7, Per will swing back for 7, put Marco down to 2, and so that Ancient Tomb will not be able to be used there, and Per will go up to 11 here himself. That was a sick sequence of plays. Marco Per drawing his sideboard cards perfectly. He has 1 Echoing Truth and 2 Show and Tells. He drew all of them in this game.
So big attacks here. The City of Traitors, if Marco de Togni has to play another land in order to cast Reality Smasher, will go away.
Yeah, but the thing is now, if Marco draws another land, like an Eye of Ugin or another Eldrazi Temple, he still wins. He just can't use the Ancient Tomb, so he's really going slow on this land. What is it?
Well, there's still the Force of Will.
There's still the Force of Will.
That's Henriksson in fine shape as things turn out, in spite of the big sideboard card from Marco de Togni on turn 0, that Leyline of the Void. This has been a game all about sideboard cards, both of them able to line up fairly well, disrupt the plan of the other.
Yeah, if Marco had been on 1 life more and drawn something like an Eye of Ugin, he could have played both Reality Smashers, even to get through that 1 Force of Will.
And if Per Henriksson had been on 1 life less, then this game would already be over.
Yeah, exactly. This game has been it doesn't look that way at first glance, but this game has been super close, and Per did really well to navigate the game in such a way. But of course, the cards fell in the right way for him, and it looks like Per Henriksson forgot to discard to hand size again.
Tisk and Tisk again.
Yeah, I think he has 8. Yeah, so. Not much has happened here, so he'll just get a warning from the judge, and he'll get to discard properly. But he'll have to be careful in the future games and matches, because if you pick up several of the same kind of warning, you might actually get a game loss.
Yeah, Grand Prix are long events. There's still plenty more rounds here, and each of these players on a good enough record that they do not want to be dropping games to anything other than maybe a bit of bad luck here and there, and ideally not even then.
Yeah. Yeah, Marco thinking here, what can I do here? Not much, I don't think, but he's going to try. Endless One. Still, it's actually not lethal. It would be an attack for 9 if that resolved, thanks to that Eldrazi Mimic, but I think Per is going to force this anyway. He just knows that the only thing Marco would be able to do was tap his Ancient Tomb to kill himself.
And there's still potential for another land to come down there, so he needs to at least consider what happens if another land that can produce mana comes along. Yeah,
sure, but there's actually not. There's no combination of cards. I think, yeah. Okay, Per just even let it resolve because he knows that it's only an attack for 9. Yeah, so Per is going to go down to 2, and he's going to swing for lethal. Per Henriksson reading Eldrazi Mimic for the 3rd time this match.
And it's always best to make sure. It certainly doesn't hurt.
Yeah, of course.
Especially when we're talking about the dying turns.
Yeah, especially when he has lethal on board. Trying to explain how it works. Yeah, Per was probably just wondering why is it grow up to a 4/4 when Endless One is effectively 0/0 that's written on the card, but it actually works. It does copy the actual power and toughness of the creature.
And the cool thing that we saw a little bit at the Pro Tour was someone casts something and the Eldrazi Mimic trigger goes on the stack. You then dismember in response.
Oh yeah.
And then if you choose to copy the values, all of a sudden, at the point it went to the graveyard, it was a 0/0 again, and potentially you kill a Mimic.
Yeah. All right, so players at 2 life each, but one has a Grizzlebrand, and there's the handshake. Per Henriksson on Reanimator, 10-1, casually, fighting through Graveyard Hate.
Sunday Morning Magic going okay for Per Henriksson here, managing to turn his Reanimator deck into more of a show and tell deck after game 2. locking things up there, getting the 2-1 victory. So that is the end of round 11 here. So we are completed of our main matches, but do stay tuned because there's an awful lot more Magic for you. We're going to be passing things across to Simon Gertzen and Riley Knight for more Magic here at GP Prague.
You could participate in next year's Magic Online Championship. Earn qualifier points in leagues and other Magic Online events for your chance to qualify. Find out more at mtgo.com.